Hi. Hi, everybody. Hope you've all been doing well. It's been a long time since I've made any videos, so this one's going to be interesting. I hope you've all been doing well, and I hope you've been enjoying playing lots of different games as we've almost completed the year of 2021. Now, this one in particular has been one I've been kind of brewing around in my head for quite a few months, actually. And it's taken some time of playing some other games, coming back to Villainous and playing it a little bit here and there, in person, online with some friends, all that stuff. To now where I kind of feel like, I don't want to say I'm a god, but I kind of understand the game to a pretty decent level in terms of what are some good play experiences, what are some bad play experiences that players have. So this video right here is essentially the Disney Villainous 2.0 pitch. What does that mean exactly? That means I'm going to be running through essentially all the different changes I'm going to propose that you can use to play Disney Villainous right here, and now have some new experiences and changes to your normal game experience. Because, believe it or not, this game is almost 4 years old. Next year, it's going to be 4 years old. And as of the time of this recording, we already know there's a new expansion coming out in March. So, with these changes right here, this is kind of a way that, you can still play the game that you normally like to play with the way the cards are printed and all that stuff. But this right here is going to make it so as the game has kind of grown and evolved, as we've done so much gameplay of it and played it over time and seen all these competitive games happening, this will kind of help balance out that experience for you if you feel like you're kind of running dry with your gameplay experience right now. Now, these are just my opinion. I could be completely wrong. Let me know in the comments below if you think I absolutely suck at everything I'm about to pitch here. And this video is going to be pretty long. So I hope you stick with me on the entire ride. And without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into all of the gameplay changes for Disney Villainous. Now, to break up this video, I'm going to put timestamps in the video for this one as well. And I'm also going to be doing it by segment. So the first segment that we're going to do that's kind of general is all the general gameplay changes that affect all villains. And then after that, we'll go individually villain by villain, and we're going to start by basically doing the villains in chronological order by their set. So, and you'll kind of see some things evolve and change as we go about doing that. So I hope you folks understand how this video is going to be laid out. Now, the first set of changes right here is the general system gameplay changes right here. So these are changes that are going to be affecting all of the different characters in this game. Now, I feel like these changes aren't super crazy, so stick with me here. And I also want to keep in mind, too, that one of these changes I'm going to be pitching right here is something that we've been doing in two-player competitive. So if you've seen us do any of the live streams from over the past year and such, you're probably going to already know what some of this stuff might be, but this is mainly to help better balance out your two-player experiences. But you can also maybe try to do some of this stuff in multiplayer games as well. So keep that in mind as we go. Now, the first of the core rules is what I just talked about. The mulligan rule. If you are playing a two-player game of Disney Villainous, whoever decides to go second is allowed to mulligan. If you don't know what a mulligan is, if you haven't played like typical trading card games or just card games in general, basically a mulligan allows you to look at your hand before you start the game, discard some cards, shuffling them back into your deck, and then once you've done all of that, you basically shuffle up your deck and you draw back up to your hand size. So let's say I'm Scar, I draw 4 cards, I draw 2 copies of Pride and 2 copies of Injustice. I hate my hand, but I get to go second. I can discard some of those cards, shuffle them back into the deck, and then draw new cards to fill up. So if I discard 3 of those, I get to gain 3 back. The reasoning for this particular change is that we actually kind of did some math at the very beginning of Season 1, and it actually influenced this change for Season 2 of the Wicked League, that actually kind of showed that the first player kind of had an easier time winning for the most part. So this kind of made it so the second player had a better chance of, getting that extra oomph that they needed when they went second. So that way they probably had the cards that they needed. They already gained the extra power because that extra 1 power didn't really do a whole lot. And making it so that there was an additional power gain for that turn can actually incredibly balance or like debalance whatever villains that were going up. So this is a change definitely for your 2-player games. We have not tried any of this with multiplayer. So I wouldn't try doing that, but definitely if you're playing a lot of this in 2 players, I definitely would do this change for sure. Keep in mind with this mulligan change, though, that the first player does not get this mulligan. Typically in card games, both the players do get this choice, but in this case right here, we actually feel like if you get to go first in this game, you get a lot of advantage because you have your entire board open for yourself. So it makes no sense for you to have that option to mulligan. So there you go, the mulligan rule. Now for the second core gameplay change, and this is actually the last of it, everything else is pretty much unchanged. This is actually how condition triggers work. So in normal Disney Villainous, let's say if you have a condition card that triggers when an ally or item is moved. So basically any of the perfectly wretched condition, all those villains have those conditions. Those can actually trigger based off of fate cards. This change is now making it so only villain cards that are moved this way will actually trigger this condition. What was kind of going on is that certain villains would have really powerful items that would, take place. So for example, as a Scar player, sometimes I'll use Whisper or Stampede to move a hero that's got a Prophecy or Rafiki stick on it. Those are fate items. Because of me doing that on my turn, the opponent now gets the chance to actually play one of those condition cards. And this can actually be all sorts of things too, and I don't need to get into all of those. This change right here makes it so it has to be villain cards that the player has played. This makes it so you are actually trying to use the conditions as a counter to what the opponent has already done, rather than doing something that you as the player have slapped onto the opponent and the opponent has to deal with and you're benefiting off of it. This is just going to make it so you no longer do those plays such as, if you got 2 items out, you get to play this condition and both of those items are fate items. This can kind of get a little weird with a lot of the characters. So making it so it's only specifically villain cards now will make it so those conditions and how they work are what they're meant to be, which are truly counter cards to what the opponent has set up on their board. So there you go. That's very simple change. You're going to probably see a lot of nice new interactions with this and how you get to use those conditions. So hopefully that's going to help change your experience. All right, so now we're going to get into the worst takes it all villains. So all 6 of these villains right here were kind of the base starter characters. So when I go over a character, I'll kind of give you a little bits and pieces of why some of these changes were made. For a lot of these characters, some of the changes are actually kind of global changes, and you'll kind of see that a little bit in terms of just kind of how balancing we've seen throughout the sets has kind of taken effect. So as we go through and you see this stuff, I might not go into detail about all of it because it's sort of repeating, but we'll kind of go over it as we see fit. So without further ado, let's get into the worst takes it all villains. Let's start with Maleficent here. Luckily, Maleficent doesn't really have a whole lot of changes, but there are 2 major changes that are kind of global that are taking effect on Maleficent here. So the first one here is that curses are no longer labeled as a curse type. They are now labeled as an item. They also now have curse in the name. What this means is that whenever certain conditions such as the move ally or item or have this many items in play would take effect, the curses will now actually trigger those. This means that the curses no longer are the kind of their own unique card and will allow it so certain villains who have those types of conditions and you're going to be interacting with those cards a lot, you can actually interact with those with the conditions. This is not going to change any other way how Maleficent is played. And keep in mind, too, that any card that's in the Fate deck that would call out a curse, since curse is now in the name of the card, that's why. You can now interact with those this way. This kind of, it does the same word terminology that Scar has with the hyenas. So that's kind of the justification for doing it this way. So keep that in mind. On top of this, Malice has its trigger condition now reduced from 4 strength to 3, but it still does keep the ability to defeat a hero of a strength of 4 or less as part of it. One of the things that you probably have noticed while playing a lot of Disney Villainous throughout all the sets is that there's kind of this consistent, range of strength that exists throughout the entirety of the heroes. And this definitely takes effect after you get through the worst takes it all. So a pretty consistent change that you're going to see through all these villains right here is that any one of them that had a strength of 4 for these conditions is now reduced to 3. So keep that in mind as we go through this. So that way, basically what this is going to help you do is that if you're Maleficent and you're playing against a character that's got a lot of 3 strength heroes and such that they're going to be vanquishing, you're going to be able to pop this one off more. So there you go. And that's it for Maleficent. She doesn't really have any other changes. She's actually in a really good spot. These changes really just kind of help globalize like all of the stuff that she can do. So there you go. That is as Maleficent. So the next villain in the roster right here is Queen of Hearts. Now, Queen of Hearts is kind of interesting because one of the major things while making all these changes throughout the entire roster is to make sure that characters can make meaningful decisions and are forced to do so throughout the entirety of their game plan. Now, Queen of Hearts definitely can still have these situations, but she gets in these areas where she kind of just gains way too much power. And now she's just slapping cards down and she's waiting for the cards to come through her deck, making it so you're removing all the decision-making factors of the character at certain points because she can just gain a lot of power. She has a lot of ways to cut the cost. She can gain a lot naturally because most of her locations that she wants to go to, she's always going to be gaining it. So these kind of changes reflect some of that. So let's kind of go ahead and dive into them. So first things first, to kind of go getting out of the way, and this is for all the worst takes at all villains that have these conditions. Fury's trigger is now 3 strength from 4. So guess what? Instead of having to wait for a 4 strength hero to be defeated, you can hit it off at 3. Still really good. Shouldn't really change anything too much. Now, the next one is Alice. Now, Alice makes it now so you don't have this weird situation where Queen of Hearts can get in a lock. Now, I know a lot of you folks that have seen a lot of competitive play. You can say yes or no about this. One of the big design things that I did when I was approaching this entire change list right here is that I don't want any characters to get into any locks. So with this right here, Alice now has it so you can take the move action if you want to as Queen of Hearts, but you're going to have to spend 2 power to do so. This will make it so if you do have some positioning issues, you can spend power to actually reposition yourself and get out of the lock. But you're going to have to spend some money to do so. And guess what? If you're playing against Queen of Hearts correctly, you can put her in situations where she's not going to be gaining a whole lot of power. There's another change that'll be coming up too that will also kind of limit how much power you're going to be able to gain too. So we'll get to that here in a second. But there you go. That's Alice. That's basically all the fake card changes. So don't worry about that. The next change for Queen of Hearts is Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Their strength is now increased from 2 to 3. The biggest thing I saw when Queen of Hearts is being played in competitive play is that Tweedledee and Tweedledum was always discarded. They cost too much for what they did. They were only 2 strength. Now, this should incentivize you to at least think about it a little bit more if you want to play them out, because you need to keep in mind that your card guards are your main tool. So if you discard the card guards, you're not winning as much, but they were actually better to use the Vanquish than the Tweedles because they cost a lot less, because they're 1 or 2. And the 2-coster actually has more strength than the Tweedle boys. So this will at least make it so if you're going to spend 3 to put them out, it's pretty good. And you got to keep in mind too, they're only at 1 location, and you're probably going to want to use that move action to try to move the card guards around to get, their position all messed up. So this will at least make it so it's now a thought rather than an automatic discard in your decisions. Very Merry Unbirthday. Now this card right here is probably Queen of Hearts' best card. Straight up. No questions asked. Now, what this card has changed to is what Cruella does with, I Live for Furs card. What it was before is that you can just basically count every single ally in your realm, regardless of their position, and gain the money. Now you can only gain it per ally at each location. This should make it so, you are now going to have to spread your allies out to get the most out of this card. And since you only have technically 2 unique allies with the Tweedles and the King, your card guards are going to be your best bet to try to get this to work. And since you're already stacking them up at the 4 different locations, you're not going to be able to gain, 5, 6 crazy power when you're trying to get everything laid out while you're still playing card guards, while you might be trying to vanquish one of those big, thick heroes like Alice or the Cheshire Cat. So this will be really good to help make sure that when Queen of Hearts is getting in those crazy power situations, she doesn't get into them anymore. Now, it's important to know I didn't change the stopwatch at all. And the thing for the stopwatch is that it does require you to have wickets, which requires you to spend money, which also requires you to spend money to play the card guard, and initially you have to spend money on the stopwatch. And use an activate action when you need to. So there's a lot of sacrifice with that card. Since Very Merry Unbirthday costs 0 already, lots of 0-cost cards in Disney Villainous require you to already have some type of either a sacrifice or something already in play to get the benefit off of it. So in this case right here, you're not sacrificing anything. You just need to have something out in play. And this is going to make it so to do so, you just need to be a little bit more strategic to get the most benefit off of it. So there you go. That is essentially the changes for Queen of Hearts. These make a lot of sense, and hopefully you folks think so too. All right, so this next one's really quick. It's Prince John. Prince John's got 1 change on it, and it's really, really simple. So at Prince John, he's really balanced. He's got some really cool decisions that he can make in the game. And even though he's gaining a lot of power, his power is also the way he has to win. So when he wants to do stuff, you're kind of doing this nice little balance of how much do I spend? How much am I going to be able to gain with some combo stuff? So that way you can maximize your profits. Now, the thing that is occurring in competitive play most of the time is that condition cards are really trying to be dodged a lot. And characters that have these 6 power, threshold conditions, they just aren't getting played anymore because most of the villains can bounce around 2 to 3 power in their stockpile at basically any given time. With this now, with Prince John, we're taking the trigger requirement of greed and reducing it from 6 to 5. This will make it so some of the villains that need to have a little bit more power in their stockpile, you're going to be able to hit this a lot more. Some villains are going to be constantly spending that power, or they don't gain a lot of power in general. But the ones that kind of can stockpile a little bit more, for example, like what we just talked about with Queen of Hearts, this should make it so you're going to actually want to make that decision a little bit more often. So that way you can force them to make sure they're spending their money or maybe not stockpile so much. So this should be really good to help out Prince John. And that's really it. Prince John's also in a really good spot too. I don't really think he needs to have any other changes. Now, Captain Hook. Hopefully Brian doesn't kill me for the changes that I'm making, but luckily there's only 2, and one of them is essentially a condition globalizing change. And it's actually a buff. Obsession's strength trigger is now 3 from 4. Still really good. So now it's even better than it was before, and you're going to definitely want to play it. So Hook has got this really nice tool now that can basically trigger off of hero defeats, which is really, really good for him. Now, the other one is more of actually kind of in line with something we saw from Despicable Plots with Lady Tremaine. And what's happening here is that Give 'em a Scare is now costing 2 from 1. Now, kind of what you've heard me say with Queen of Hearts, kind of the goal here is to make it so when villains want to do some of these core tools that are really good for them, if they're gaining lots of money, you need them to spend a little bit more, so they have to actually make decisions about what they want to play, how much, which cards they want to, discard and all that stuff. Now, Give 'em a Scare has always been really good. You basically get to look at 2 cards and you either discard them or you keep them back on the top and you kind of, reorder them for Hook's favor, especially when he's trying to get Pan out. And towards the end game, he can basically use this to basically decide, all right, these really bad fake cards are about to come out. I could chuck them, or I can leave them there knowing that my opponent is not going to be able to do anything to really stop me. Since this is a fate deck manipulation tool that has no basically, bad thing happening to you, you basically have to make a decision. Making it 2 power is going to make it so Hook has a little bit more power that he has to spend to make those types of decisions. Hook overall can get into a power situation, but most of the time he can't. But that's only when he doesn't have to spend a lot of money to do so. And with this, you're going to still want to play Give 'em a Scare. It's a really good card. But you're just going to have to spend an additional money to do so. And especially in the early game when he does not have access to the tree, this will make it so playing it is going to be a little bit more decision-making rather than just playing it because, yeah, it's a really good card, so you're going to want to play it. So there you go. Captain Hook. That's all that needs to be with Captain Hook. Everything else with him is really good. He's got really good strengths and weaknesses that really balance him out. So other than that, I don't think anything else needs to be changed about our Mr. Hookman. Now we're getting the latter 2 characters of the first box here, and these kind of start where the changes really hit the hard end of some stuff. So hopefully you don't yell at me too much. We're going to start with Jafar because for the most part, Jafar's changes are actually a little bit more of a play experience balance rather than actually a balance of his power and speed and all that stuff. Jafar is probably the best paced character in the game in terms of how you need to get him started and how you have to get to his end game. Literally, the designers have said that Jafar is kind of the tent pole of how speed is in Disney Villainous for the most part. And it definitely shows because he can kind of go really fast, but he can also kind of go really slow. So that kind of balances out based off how cards come about for you in his deck. And his main weakness is essentially power, and it's literally how all of his cards in his Fate deck kind of work, are around the power that you have to spend to deal with things. So with that being said, the first thing we'll talk about is his main card I hate, and everyone's heard me complain about it before, Deception. One thing that has been removed from the game is how Deception and Trickery work. And they're both going to work the same. We'll cover that in Ursula, but it's going to be the same thing. The trigger of it's the same, but now it kind of works similar to Injustice. What happens is if the opponent has the 2 items out, you basically get to look at the top 2 cards of your Fate deck, and you basically get to either discard them or put them back as you wish. This kind of keeps the spirit of, first off, the theme of what the card does, Deception, but also makes it so if Jafar wants to dodge around some stuff, you can. You no longer can play this on your opponent's turn to go play a fake card. That experience is just not fun for anyone to deal with, in any shape or form. And especially now, on top of now, you can't play it off of fate cards, is going to make this card a lot more balanced. And it's actually a really good tool for Jafar, allowing him to basically like, all right, if Aladdin or Abu are going to be coming up, I can just use that and just chuck them out of my way, and I can dodge that bullet as much as I can. So it's a really good card still to help out Jafar, but it's no longer going to be a bad play experience for the opponent. So there you go. That's Deception. Now, the other changes that are coming up right here are going to actually be in the same thing, and it's kind of going to balance each other out a little bit, so you're not going to probably see this as much. Crushing Blow now has it so only heroes with a printed strength of 3 or less can be discarded from the realm. So, or allies, my bad. You guys know what I mean by that. What this does is that there was a strategy in which what you could do is, let's say you hypnotize Abu. You can throw some swords onto Abu, and then guess what? Since Abu has a strength of 4 now, you can't get rid of him with a Crushing Blow, which sucks because Abu is one of the ways to help stop Jafar. Now, the sword really wasn't used for anything else besides maybe to try to do some necessary sacrifice to gain some money plays, but definitely as a defense tool, it made it so the sword didn't make any sense for what you really should be using the sword for. So now, this will make it so even if you put a sword on Abu and another card, you can get around this and still put that back in. And it's important to note, too, is that if you're taking Abu or Aladdin, which we'll get to, back in the discard pile, you are wasting that to try to get rid of another ally that could be used to defeat something else that's a normal ally, something like that, or playing the other fake card, which could be a hero, like Jasmine, something like that, that's actually got a pretty powerful effect up front. You're just putting that hero back in the discard pile so it can get cycled back through. So that's the change for that. Now, you probably already heard me say this, Aladdin's strength is now 3. Aladdin can now be hit by Crushing Blow always. Doesn't matter. But his strength is now 3. So he's going to be a little easier to vanquish in terms. You could still hypnotize him for 3, so he actually costs technically 1 less. And even if you do some of the hourglass stuff, he'll even cost less than that than he typically does. So it's actually a buff for Jafar because he doesn't have to spend so many resources to take him out. But now it will at least, require, you can actually make that choice to Crushing Blow him back into the discard pile if you so choose to. So overall, these are just kinds of things to make it so Jafar doesn't have any frustrating situations. The latter with the Crushing Blow situation from Aladdin and Abu really isn't going to matter too much. It just kind of gives you some more decisions you can make as the fading player. And the Deception thing, I hate Deception, its old version. So this should really help kind of clean that up. So there you go. That's all Jafar. Jafar is pretty much already a pretty good villain in terms of his balance and stuff, so we don't really need to worry about dealing with any other stuff with Jafar. Now, here is my absolute one I was not ready to talk about today. Ursula. Ursula is just a mean sea witch bitch. And God, was she just hard to think about. Because there's so many things that you can really kind of hit Ursula with. Now, when I was talking with some friends about Ursula over the past year, I think the biggest things that we can really say is that Ursula has a really cool game plan. She can actually move really fast. The problem is that there's so many weaknesses kind of built into how Ursula works that it makes her frustrating to play. And what happens is that it incentivizes her to essentially stack heroes at a location, fate nonstop using Grow Giant to fate, as well as just go fate at the ship, and use that to slow down your opponent to a point that Ursula's just like, okay, I can now go gain some resources to go try to finish the plan off and look for particular cards to win almost instantly. That's not a really fun way to make decisions with a character. So these changes right here really kind of help fix a lot of this stuff. So hopefully you agree with me. So let's kind of jump into these changes now. So you're going to see this on a few different characters, mainly Despicable Plots ones, but we'll get there when we get there. Ursula has the first board change of all the characters that we're going to be talking about today. Ursula's lair has the gain 1 power removed, but you take the activate action and move it to the bottom. So now she has a location similar to what Prince John has, as well as Ratigan and Lady Tremaine, where there's basically 3 actions at the bottom of 1 location. This will make it so all of her activate, cards that have that action on them actually usable now. But the cost is that you're no longer going to be able to go to Ursula's lair and gain any money. So, and you'll see too, there is some ways that you're going to be able to get around this now, not be able to gain money at the lair. But don't worry, we'll get there as we cover the cards. This is going to make all the activate cards a lot more powerful. There are a few tweaks to how some of these work to make sure they're not super overblown, but we'll get to them as we see. The next one is all binding contracts now cost 1 from 2. Binding contracts are the main way that Ursula has to vanquish. And by default, usually just to vanquish one hero costs you around 3 power. You count the binding contract and basically using one of the move tools, and that's not including using one of the eels, which technically by default costs more, but then you have to go take the activate action, which you can never take anyways because it always gets blocked. So you get the idea. So this is going to make it so to basically vanquish a hero, it's going to cost you around maybe 2 power to do for the most part. So maybe higher end with the eels, but the eels are a passive ability, and you'll be able to do that if you just move to the location. So you get to save money in the long term with this. So there you go. This will make it so it's going to be a lot easier to try to vanquish the heroes in general, and you still have to do it the same way. There's no other tweaks to how the contracts work besides their cost. This right here, enough, should really help Ursula be able to start taking heroes out and actually want to do so because she has money to do other things. So there you go. That's one of the first big changes. Hopefully you really like that one. Change form now costs 0. Now the reason for this is that basically there's a lot of discussion about actually using that lock token and switching it back and forth. It's Ursula's main gimmick compared to all the other characters besides the way that she vanquishes with the binding contracts. Moving the lock token now doesn't cost anything. You can just do that. All fine and dandy puppy dogs and rainbows. This will make it now in the early game if you want to try to use the shore to gain some money, move stuff around while you're looking for your main tools. Because you have to remember, the eels are the only way to effectively kind of do the moving for free without having to spend extra money. With this, in the early game, while you're trying to build up your stockpile to play your cards, to move stuff around, take the heroes out and everything, this will make it so you don't have to spend money to play it, and you can start actually doing some effective things. So it'll be a lot more useful of a card in the early game for sure because it doesn't cost you money. You can save that money to do other things like vanquishing, playing out your main tools, and all that stuff. So this should really help Ursula out a lot in general right here. Now, Arrogance falls in line with all the other cards. Normally it has required a 4 strength hero to be defeated. Now it's a 3. Still a really good card. You're going to probably want to use this for Ursula because she's still going to be digging for cards. And now the 3 strength trigger, there's going to be a lot more situations which you're going to want to use this or get to play it against a variety of the villains in the roster. So hopefully you really like that change. Now we're going to cover Trickery right here. Trickery is the same thing as Deception. Also on top of that, Trickery's trigger is now 5 from 6, similar to what Prince John is. So it's basically the opponent's got 5 power. You get to look at your top 2 cards, basically discard them or keep them in the top of the deck. This is also really good for Ursula because I didn't want to manipulate the Fate deck and how it worked too much because in general, it's actually kind of okay designed on paper with everything that's going to be modified here. And we'll kind of get to a few of the Fate cards that did get modified when we get to them. So this should really help out as well with Trickery. It's now going to, and you won't, now it's not going to incentivize Ursula to be a Fate monster and all that fun stuff. So hopefully that will help you folks out in your play experiences. The Cauldron. Cauldron's been completely reworked. I think it's the first truly reworked card in the entirety of what we've been talking about today. Don't worry, there's going to be more of those down the road, so I hope you're looking forward to them. The Cauldron is still an activate. It now costs 2 from 1, and what you can do is you can activate the card to go find a binding contract from your deck or discard pile and put it in your hand. The catch, though, is that it has to be at Ursula's lair to actually gain the effect. What this means now is that in the early game, if you don't have any of the key items out and the opponent does get Aerial, you do have the Cauldron in play. Aerial can counter that. So now there's actually a reason to move that item out of the way and have Aerial do something other than trigger or hit the crown or the trident at any given point. So this should be really good to help you out, to fix those things. So hopefully you enjoy that change. And plus the Cauldron now is going to be something you're going to want to use because if you're looking for a particular contract to take a hero out, you just have to activate it. You don't have to spend any money. You just have to take the activate action, throw that thing on somebody, and you're good to go. So that's it for the Cauldron. Now, we're going to be talking about a few of the Fate cards now. There's actually only 3 that got modified. And 2 of them are just mainly copies changed. So the first one, I would actually say is probably the worst fake card in the deck for Ursula. It's Sebastian. Sebastian is now, when he is played, you basically return a binding contract that is played on a hero to Ursula's hand. What this means now is that now it's on top of some of the cost changes and some other things. If you played the contract onto someone and it was already really expensive, you're no longer going to have that be put onto Sebastian, because it was incentivized before to basically play Sebastian onto location, grab the binding contract, and that binding contract, it has to be, you have to move the hero to that location where Sebastian's at, so it requires essentially 2 moves. Now you have to keep in mind, you can't put 2 binding contracts on a hero, but that's not really effective. So doing this now is going to make, or this change now is going to make it so Sebastian still sucks, but he's not going to suck as bad. And you get the contract back in your hand, so you just have to basically burn an action and spend the money to replay the contract out. Good to go. No problems. Return the Form has its copies reduced from 3 to 2. This will make it so return to form loops, when you're trying to vanquish the heroes, because one of the things with Ursula's heroes, for the most part, they're all plate effects. Now having it only 2, you're still going to have to worry about that, but not worry about it as much. So that chance is still there, but you won't have to be as scared of it. You're still going to have to be scared of it, but it will at least incentivize you a little bit more to vanquish the heroes, so that way you don't have so many of them. And kind of something I always tout about this, if a villain's got a lot of heroes with played card effects and they have one of those replay the hero from the discard pile, if you're vanquishing a lot now and you're putting more of those heroes back into the discard pile, your opponent now has to make more decisions when they fate you, rather than always have to play the one that they know is going to be really good. So this should kind of help out deal with that situation a little bit better. So hopefully that makes sense. Now the last change is Snarfblatt. It now has its copies increased from 2 to 3. Its effect, though, now has the cost requirement reduced from 3 to 2, and you can't stack them. So this is also something you might notice with another villain when we get down there, that you're no longer going to have to force a Ursula to spend 6 or 8 power or whatever it is to basically play binding contract onto a hero that needs to be defeated. You can only play 1. It's still going to be pretty expensive, because you have to think about this. King Triton contract's now going to cost 2. Originally it was 3. Then you're going to have to, if you play Snarfblatt, it's now going to go from 3 to 5. And then you still have that extra requirement of the effect, or if you get that extra action to kind of move him off and stuff like that. So it's going to go from 5, or no, it's going to go from like whatever it could be, like 9 or 10, to the maximum on Triton to be 5. So it's not as ridiculous. And now since Ursula's got a lot more power that she can use to do stuff that she's not spending in other places that don't make any sense, she's definitely going to want to, she's going to still do that and not have a problem. Sebastian's still going to suck in the situations, but just not as bad. Thankfully, thank God. So there you go. That's Ursula's changes. I hope you really like those. They should really help make sure that Ursula does not suck to play anymore. Really, this is going to make it so she still has the same game plan. She still wants to do all the same stuff. And she's going to be fine. She's not going to be super painful to play anymore. And she's not going to be incentivized to be a fate monster and stack heroes. You're now going to actually have decisions to make on both ends of Ursula. And hopefully you should have fun with her. So that's all the worst takes it all villains right there. So now that we covered those, we're not going to be going into the other villains. And luckily for the most part, until we get down to Despicable Plots, most of these changes are very small and they're very balance heavy. These, for the most part, outside of like Jafar and Ursula, these are kind of more like quality of life changes right here to kind of balance them to play better with the rest of the roster. The ones while we're going forward are very much balance-like changes. These aren't really going to really, you'll see when we get to them. So now without further ado, let's jump into Wicked to the Core, and let's cover those 3 villains. Let's jump right into it. Now, of all the 3 of the villains at Wicked to the Core, probably the villain that needed the most quality of life and some things needed to help get them into a more competitive atmosphere to play in a 2-player environment is Hades. Hades has been tooled quite a bit with these changes that I'm about to list off here, and one of them you might already predict based off of something I already listed in the previous villain that we talked about. So the overall goal with Hades right here is really just kind of to try to lift him up, because he had a lot of tools that incentivized him to kind of be more of a vanquish monster, and his goal is to play Titans and move them to the other side. Now, Disney Villainous definitely has a core aspect of you need to vanquish heroes to continue moving forward. These changes right here should kind of really help make sure that Hades can actually kind of play the game against faster characters without, being too powerful. So let's just talk about these changes really fast. Eye of the Fates now costs 1 from 2. It also has its copies reduced from 3 to 2. We can all agree Eye of the Fates was not a very useful card. It was expensive, it was very much an emergency, and because there were some other tools that Hades likes to use, since it discards them until you get the ally or the Titan, you're chucking a lot of your deck that you need to use to help progress and be a little bit more effective. So this change right here, this is going to make it so you will actually want to play Eye of the Fates in those emergency situations because it doesn't cost so much. And since there's one less copy of it, which we'll get to the copy of the card that got a bonus copy, this should make it so you're actually going to want to play it when you need that extra pinch. It's not going to be so much of a sacrifice. The next card that we're going to talk about is Ruthless. Ruthless has the same ability that it gives, but now, similar to all the other power style conditions, its trigger now hits 5. This should make it so when you're playing against those villains that have a little bit higher the power stock hold, this will definitely make it in competitive play that you're going to want to play this more. You're probably still not going to want to hold on to it too often because unlike the other two, this one right here requires you to actually have a card in hand. So there's still a little bit of a restriction requirement on it. It's still really good for Hades though, because he needs lots of money to do stuff. So it'll at least give you that thought when you know your opponent is going to probably reach that threshold of power. But there you go. It's now an option. You can at least now think before you want to discard the card. Mortality Potions copies has now increased from 3 to 4. Titans are a big key in Hades' deck. You want to use them to vanquish stuff. And since they go away and you need them to actually progress your goal, you need some other tools out there to make sure that they don't die. This will make it so now having an extra copy, you basically have an extra ally in your deck, sort of. So it's a really nice tool to have. So hopefully this way, this will incentivize you a little bit more to kind of think about if you want to use your Titans to vanquish some of the heroes out in play, especially if you just want to go to the underworld, play a potion, and vanquish. You won't have to worry about counting how many potions you got anymore. Having 4 is a pretty decent amount, and you basically can treat it as a bonus ally. So there you go. That's the Mortality Potion. All the Titans are now allies, and their names now have Titan afterwards. This is the same thing as the curses, and the justification is the same thing as the hyenas. So now when you move an ally or item, and they count also towards the ally goals like manipulation, the Titans will now also, with all these changes that Hades is getting, it's going to make it so there is some more counterplay against Hades himself. So it's kind of weirdly a nerf in a way, but it's going to help have those conditions play out. Now, something to note with this is that you're probably already thinking, Gospel Truth calls out allies. Put the restriction on there that, guess what? Only non-Titan allies can be discarded. So Titans can't be rid of in any shape or form or discarded unless you use them to vanquish without a potion. So keep that in mind. And all the cards that would normally affect Titans, guess what? Since Titan's in their name, you slap that down, bam. You're going to be good to go. So there you go. Small change. A little bit more counterplay. I don't think it's going to be too much of an issue with Hades. Pain. Pain now cost 1. Didn't really make a whole lot of sense that he cost 2 to begin with. He does have a really strong ability, but since Hades already has like a lot of weird power stuff going on with the character, and the pain costs 2, and only had a strength of 2, and really its ability, there's characters and allies and other decks that do the same thing for the same purpose, and pain is one unique card that costs 2, make him 1. It makes it a lot easier to play and justify playing. He's already really good for helping with defense and moving heroes around that you don't want to deal with in the Hades deck. But this will at least make it so it's not going to be as cost draining with the character. Last change with Hades is actually a buff to a hero that definitely needed it. It's Phil. He now gains +2 instead of 1. Phil was just never a character you wanted to use and play unless he was absolutely forced. Now, if Hercules is out and you draw Phil and you get the right situation for yourself, Phil's going to be a little bit more desirable to play rather than maybe playing another effect or something like that to possibly like block Mount Olympus. Granted, you as the Hades player are still going to probably want to vanquish Hercules first, but it's at least going to give you that idea of Phil's in the way. he's now a lot of strength. I don't know what to do. So it's at least going to make him no longer an afterthought when the fading player is going to, choose what to do. So this should hopefully help make him so Danny DeVito is actually playable. Other than that, there's no more changes with Hades. These changes right here should really kind of hopefully help, him out. A few little cost reductions, make it so it's a little easier to vanquish and use the Titans. Hades, in my experience, is actually really easy to use and actually try to win with when you're doing the things correctly. He just gets in weird situations where he has to vanquish a lot of heroes and he does not have the tools to deal with it. And since he's already spending a lot of money to get those Titans out and move them across the board, he doesn't have ways to kind of make his goal move a little faster. So these changes right here should help save him a few bucks, make it so when you need something in a pinch, you can go get it a little quicker, and that's it. And now he's got a little more counterplay. So Hades overall, pretty decent spot. Funny enough, in the next 8 villains that we got, I don't know why I looked at my watch there. The next 8 villains or so that we're gonna be covering, really not a whole lot of changes. He's actually probably got the most of all the characters that I'm gonna be listing right now. So without further ado, let's jump in to everyone's favorite doctor. Dr. Facilier, probably on paper the best character in Disney Villainous. He's also one of my favorite characters to play, so I'm biased when making this, but does need a little few tune downs to make it so he's not so strong. The biggest thing with Doctor is that he can just do everything. He has so many options to kind of deal with what's coming about him, and really his biggest weakness is RNG. You get those cards on the fortune stack, and guess what? If RNG is in your favor or not, that's how you win or lose. And Doctor can actually manipulate how that RNG works pretty efficiently as long as he's doing things, with the tools that he's got. And he can gain a lot of money. So these changes right here should kind of help fix that stuff up a little bit. Not too much, though. I don't think Doctor needs to be hit that hard, personally. I just think that it goes back to what I talked about with Queen of Hearts. He has these situations where there's no longer a thinking process. He just kind of plays cards because everything that he has in his deck is really good. So tuning some of this stuff down is going to make it so he's not as strong, but he's still going to be really good. So that way he's still fun to play. And that's the key here. You don't ever want to make someone so not fun, tone them down so much that they're not fun to play. Voodoo dolls. They are now also an item and an ally. They work exactly like mass spirits. All this does, it makes it so Juju can hit a voodoo doll. What's going on right now with Doctor players that I've seen a lot is that since mass spirits cost 0 and most of the heroes aren't very strong, you can go to the Voodoo Emporium, slap a mass spirit down, and you're basically dodging that whole aspect of what it can do, where it's you keep it out there for too long, it is now a target. With this now, voodoo dolls can now be targeted by Juju, so when Juju's out in play, Juju can take something else out that is also somewhat effective. So this should help take care of that stuff. Doctor's still going to probably have items that Juju's going to want to get rid of, so that's fine. But this will make it so if Juju comes back in after being defeated and there's a voodoo doll out and that's the only thing that Juju can hit, makes it so Juju's a little stronger. So there you go, that's that change. Frog form now costs 1. This probably arguably on paper is probably the best card in the game because like I said, Doctor is already really good at vanquishing, and since the mass spirits cost 0, and this item has no other repercussion for playing it, and you basically reduce a hero's strength by 2, and it doesn't cost you anything, and you can just kill most heroes outright without the ally, it just needs to cost 1 now. So you're still going to be able to play this. It's still going to be a really good card. You're now just going to have to spend a little extra to make sure if you want to clear your board without too much, problems, you have to spend a little bit more money. The last change, believe it or not, last change for Doctor. The talisman now costs 5. Now, I know that seems like a lot of power, but you need to keep in mind that Rule New Orleans costs 4, and that one can get cycled back in, so you have to replay it. I think it costs 4. Might cost 3. Whatever. It's been a while. Still, the talisman costs 3 initially, now it costs 5. Since this item is always going to be in play and cannot be removed or put into the fortune pile by any circumstance, it might be attached to a hero. This is going to make it so there's no longer that crazy, all right, I could play both Rule New Orleans and Talisman in the same turn unless I have a lot of money. So this is going to make it so Doctor has to gain a little bit more before he can play it, which is good. Means those friends on the other side that he's going to be playing now have a little bit more of an effect because you're going to be using that money to probably play the Talisman. So There you go. You're still going to probably be able to play it quickly, but you're not going to be able to probably play it turn one and get it out there and start frightening your opponent. You're going to have to do a little bit more in order to get that, and you won't have resources to use on other things that you're going to want to play. So this will make it so Doctor has to use a little bit more of his resources to get out one of his key cards. That's it for Doctor. I don't really personally think that Doctor's got anything else you can really change about him that's going to, not make it a frustrating experience for the player. These right here will make it so he has to burn a little bit more cash and has a little bit few more holes in the game plan, so that way when opponents are facing him, he will be a little slower, but he can still do all his crazy stuff without, too much hassle. So Dr. Facilier, hope you like these changes. Hope people stop complaining about how good he is, because he's fun, but he's really good. Evil Queen, the last one of the Wicked to the Core box, and she's only got 3 changes too. Evil Queen, for the most part, basically pretty good character. Really, these changes right here are going to make it so some kind of ideas that people had about playing certain cards with her kind of go out the window. So you can't even say that this might be a balance patch, but more just like, all right, as Evil Queen, you got to make more decisions. Because she's already really good, but now your decision matrix plan with her is going to change a little bit, so you're not just going to straightforward do this plan anymore. So let's kind of get into this. Magic Tomes. Now is only 1 copy from 2. This card's busted. It's really good for her. Granted, you're going to have to check a lot of stuff when you use it, but for most part, when you're playing with Evil Queen and just how you're drawing cards at the end of your turn and what your hand's going to look like, this card is really good. And having 2 copies of it is just crazy. It makes it so the other items that she typically has that do cost a little bit, you're never going to really play them, because she's going to be able to get the stuff that she needs, mainly her ingredients, put those in her hand, and then gain the benefits of the ingredients that would be like those other items. This will make it so the other items are at least you're going to want to play. And there's going to be one of them in particular that you're definitely going to want to play after the change is made, which we're going to get to. The box. Cost 1. No longer cost 2. You're going to want to play the box now. It's really good. It does have a cap, so even reducing the cost on it, it's not going to be super crazy. But box is already really good. You should use it. Now it's going to sort of incentivize you to Vanquish a little bit more. Not really at the same time, so I don't want to say like, oh my god, a huge change. But now that it costs 1 less, you're definitely going to want to play the box. No reason to not play it at this point. So definitely play the box. Go kill some dwarves. It'll be a good time. Now, since we've reduced the amount of tomes, Black Magic now has 3 copies of it instead of 2. You basically have more emergency cards now. So if you want to try to search for something, you do have to pay a pretty penny for it, because 2 power is still a lot in the terms of, Evil Queen. But now you have more emergency. That's not really going to change much of anything with the consistency of how that character works. So hopefully you like those changes. And that's it for her. Like, she's pretty good. She's got really good weaknesses, really good strengths. Don't need to touch her. So that's it. Take those changes. Hopefully you like them. Wicked to the Core was a weird box because you had really 2 good characters and you had 1 character that really kind of need a lot of lifting. And most of these changes that I kind of listed off for these characters are going to be kind of what's going forward with the rest of the cast. And what's kind of nice is that the next 6 are pretty, for the most part, you don't need to change a lot about them. And we'll kind of get into that as we cover the characters. I'm biased because the one character we're going to cover first in the next set, you all know I really like. So we'll get into those changes, and I'll probably go way deeper into them than I need to. But let's go ahead and jump into Evil Comes Prepared. And let's start with my favorite lion boy, Scar. Scar. What an interesting fellow. He's my favorite character to play in this game. And I played way too much of him. He's also sort of kind of difficult to play, and just the fact that he can get punished really hard. Very quickly. Very fast. Scar's main weakness is the fact that he has to vanquish constantly in order to win. Most other characters that have like a vanquish type of goal where you have to defeat a particular character, that's kind of the latter half, and you have to do some other steps to get there. So you have other tools to do other things. Scar has to constantly vanquish, and his tools that he has to use to vanquish by default are pretty much cost 2. Means he has to gain a lot of power to be effective to keep moving forward. And he doesn't have a whole lot of allies as well. He's got 11 in the deck, which is still on the higher end for most of the characters. But you're going to burn through that stuff very quickly, very fast with him. And he doesn't have a lot of really good recursion tools with that. So, really good weakness. It's actually really well designed for the character. The problem is that Hakuna Matata exists. And the Hakuna cycle sucks. And there's ways to make the Hakuna cycle suck more. So these changes right here we're not touching the villain deck at all with Scar. We're going to be touching only basically a few fake cards, and that's it. So let's go ahead and talk about the 3. And I think you'll be surprised about, well, one of them you won't be surprised. You'll be surprised about how they get changed. And I'll kind of justify them. So the first one is Rafiki's Stick. And we'll actually kind of pair this with Prophecy as well. Rafiki's Stick no longer can be played on a character that's got an item. So it's got the same restriction that Prophecy has. The thing with Rafiki's Stick is that it's actually more costly than the Prophecy is. The problem, though, is when you stack or you have Prophecy and then stack Stick, it basically makes the character almost unkillable. And as Scar, you're basically destroyed from the get-go. Whether it's Mufasa or you're putting it on another character like that, it's going to make it so the Hakuna cycle starts a lot quicker because there's one hero that you basically have to vanquish twice. That's going to take way too many resources, almost possibly your entire ally pool to defeat them. So just getting rid of that's going to make it a lot easier to deal with. So Stick is still really good. You just can't stack with Prophecy. Prophecy now has 4 copies it from 3, and you'll probably already kind of figure out what the next change is. Prophecy will now incentivize you to play more of them onto heroes to make it so Scar has to burn more of his resources to kill, which is a good trade-off, at least in my opinion. The last change, Hakuna Matata, still the same card, just has 2 copies from 3. Making it 1 less copy is going to make it so the Hakuna cycle isn't going to occur as often. And now with an additional Prophecy in that suite, you're going to have some more ways to dodge it. But keep in mind now, Hakuna cycle can still happen. You have to make sure you vanquish. And that is definitely something with Scar, when you play him, you have to do. Because unlike most of the other characters where you can kind of dodge a hero here and there and leave him out, you have to constantly vanquish with Scar. So that's not going to change with the character. It's just going to make it so you're going to have to burn more resources if you want to go kill stuff. And that should be the weakness of the character because you got to spend the money. You have to make sure you have the allies in hand. You also got to have the vanquish action capability to do so. So that way you can just keep kind of going to vanquish. So there you go. That's it for Scar. Making sure the Hakuna cycle is not a thing anymore. You do that, he's great. And the things with the change with the Stick will make it so you won't have to worry about having to burn so many resources and get stuck in a Hakuna cycle portion where you have to vanquish an 8 strength Simba with a stick. That's just not fun to deal with. And trust me, you don't want to deal with that. So get rid of that. It's gone. Moving on. We're done dealing with this nonsense. I'm going to cry. We're going to cover Yzma really quickly because Yzma doesn't actually really have any changes outside of 1. This change right here is just going to make it so this card weirdly had like this extra little quirk with it that me personally I didn't think made any sense. And it's that Cruel Irony normally costed 1, now it's 0. You still have to pay for the effect that you use with Cruel Irony, and you still have to have the restriction of you have to play it at an ally's location. So it didn't make a lot of sense to make it cost 1. Now, since you have to have the ally out, and that ally costs money, and you have to be at that location, making it cost 0, and then spending the money to still play the effect because all those effects are going to still cost you money to play, this just made more sense. So there you go. Cruel Irony. Nothing more crazier than that. Yzma was great. Moving on to the Rat. Ratigan was really interesting when kind of evaluating him because Ratigan's actually a pretty quick character and he can make a lot of money, but he also needs that money to kind of progress. So it was kind of weird to tackle kind of how to do this. So I'm honestly going to say that these changes aren't necessarily probably the best. And there's only 2 of them that I've called out. Airship now costs 2 from 1. Airship was just always really good. You mainly played it after you already played the Robot Queen. So you would have blown all your cash. And since Airship to do its sweet little combo usually costed 2, if you don't count tools, now it's going to at least cost you 3 bare minimum to get it out there. That on its own right, after you spend all the resources to kind of get the Robot Queen out, should make this so this is a little harder of a combo to do, but you can still be able to do it. The Airship really wasn't used for anything else besides moving the Robot Queen to the palace. There was a few cases where you can use it to move Felicia around to kind of get in a situation where you can vanquish Basil and win that way. So that is something that can occur, but the Airship was basically the checkmate tool. So making this cost a little bit more, great. Making it cost 3 didn't make any sense to me because just the way it naturally, like it literally is only used for that one circumstance. And based off how much power Ratigan's going to have left over after he plays the Robot Queen, this just made the most sense. So it might cause you to have to do like an extra turn. just to be able to do the checkmate play. So there you go. Might not honestly do a whole lot, but hey, it's at least there. Now, Felicia has been changed a little bit, so now the power cost, if you don't sacrifice the ally, is 3. So technically, she would cost 6 to play. Ratigan's already kind of got this weakness where his ally vanquishing ability is kind of low because he doesn't have a lot of them. And Felicia's kind of like the main tool, and you can get her back out with the bell. So making it so Ratigan might have to spend a little bit more money if he wants to do the big play of spending the cash to get her out to finish the job. This will make it so it's a little more costly to do so, especially because at this point Ratigan's spending the money to get the allies out and the tools out to vanquish Basil, so he's not going to be at that giant stockhold power thing that he usually might be at while he might be trying to get the robot queen out. So this will at least make it so you have to be a little bit more cautious about how you're spending your power at this stage in the game. Overall, though, Ratigan's really in a good spot. I don't think you really need to change him too much. These right here are just going to make it so he's not going to completely blitz you towards the end of the game by just raw power overload. This right here should make it so by the time that he plays the robot queen, and if he has to defeat Basil, you have to spend maybe just a little bit more money and possibly an extra turn just to get over that hump and slow him down a little bit so he kind of plays a little bit more fair with the rest of the roster. Now that we cover the evil comes prepared villains, we're now going to get into the perfectly wretched characters. Now this is when it gets interesting because, believe it or not, Mother Gothel and Cruella I have not changed at all. They have no changes whatsoever. Kind of one of my opinions about this of the entire series is that the Perfectly Wretched box is probably the best designed box in the entirety of the game. These characters are really abstract. They have some really good ideas that have the players make meaningful decisions constantly on both the opposing side and the playing side. These characters do a really good job of it. The only catch with all these characters is that they move kind of slow. Having said that, though, with the changes done with the other characters, especially the ones that move really fast, make it so they have to spend a little bit more power or have to make a few more decisions to get to their end game is going to make it so while these characters still might be a little slower, these characters do have a little bit more options to kind of get that speed. And since characters won't be like fate blasting each other because they want to try to move a little faster, characters like Cruella, where sort of towards the end game, she might want to over fate and just kind of go back and forth to fate and try to get puppies out. That's no longer a thing. And same thing with Gothel, where kind of depending on where Rapunzel is, you won't want to go back and forth between Corona and the Tower. So that in general is kind of really my opinion. Those characters run really well and they play great. They play smooth. They don't really have any bad play experiences, even for how kind of weird that their goal setup is designed. So not touching those two. Now, Pete, on the other hand, is a little different. I still agree what I said with those previous two characters with Pete. The only thing that will happen with Pete, though, is that one of his play a card goals will be put on one of the locations that has the play card on the top. And what will happen is that, naturally, players are going to fade each other, and you're going to play a hero to that location. What happens is that Pete literally has to go to a location to vanquish, then the opponent might fate and then recover up the spot again with another hero. It won't happen consistently, but it makes it so Pete has to burn more tools that he might need to use to actually play those play card goals, and he just gets locked out. This is going to make it so he has a way to get around that a little better. Stolen Cargo has the gain 1 power changed to a vanquish. This will make it so Pete can actually vanquish a little bit more and have other ways to do so. So that way, if you have those play a card goals, you can get around that. You can argue that the Jalopy is a way to get around those as well, but you still have one other location that might have that issue. So you don't really get to solve it with the Jalopy. There's no real way to kind of get around that in an effective manner quickly to help in a competitive environment. This shouldn't really change too much because most of the heroes in Pete's Fate deck, they're pretty much on play abilities, minus like Mickey and Donald. So if you defeat them and they get cycled back through and they get replayed out, that's kind of on you to do so, but then you'll be able to vanquish them quickly because Pete's got a load of allies and they're all really, really good. So especially with their strength values based off usually how you have to defeat stuff. So I wouldn't worry too much about that being kind of a weird situation with Pete, but this will at least make it so he's got a way to get around that. I'm not going to change play a game. Or win big, that goal. as much as I think that goal is RNGesus, I do honestly believe that there is enough ways to get around that because a lot of Pete's tools are in the 2 cost range. So if you are kind of like being a little cautious about what's left in the deck and what you currently have and stacking the deck in ways, you can get to it. You are going to be able to do it. And especially if you know that's one of your goals, playing Mischief when someone gains 3 power, because they're going to gain 3 power, let's be real. You'll have ways to stack the deck in your favor pretty effectively. So I wouldn't worry too much about how that goal is going to be set up for you. So that's it for Pete. Other than that, I think he's great. I think he's one of the best designed characters in the game. So there you go. Pete is neat. That's it for Perfectly Wretched. Now the last box, Despicable Plots. I am incredibly biased when it comes to a lot of these changes that I'm going to be calling out for these characters. Me personally, I feel like Despicable Plots is the weakest design box in the set, or in all of the characters. But they have some really good ideas and designs that just weren't fully thought out and went, finished through whatever development process that they went through. These changes right here aren't necessarily to balance the characters to make them strong with the rest of the cast. I actually think a lot of these characters can do pretty well against the other characters. These changes are a little bit more to kind of balance the decision-making process and the fun factor of the characters. Before we get into that, though, I am going to call one thing out. While I say that, Lady Tremaine has no changes. I actually think Lady Tremaine is actually very well designed. She has a little bit of a weird off-put thing where she has a lot of denial stuff, where basically she's going to be doing a lot of condition counterplay that's going to say, no, stop it, you can't do anything. I know some people don't like that, and sometimes based off the situation you as the player are in, you're not going to like it. But welcome to games. Sometimes the goal is to make sure the opponent can't do something to you so you can keep moving forward. I actually really like that about Lady Tremaine. And one of the few times where you have a character that needs a particular card to move forward, she has enough unique cards that she needs to have out in play where I don't think that's super bad at all. And I think all those cards do have a usage and there's ways to use them. So Lady Tremaine's not going to be touched. I think Gaston and Horn King are the ones that need a little bit more of a touch-up. So we'll start with Gaston, we'll work our way to Horn King, and then we'll wrap up this video, call it a day, and hopefully the comments below are going to drill me for all these changes that I've listed. So let's start with Gaston. So Gaston's a weird basket case because I actually really like how his goal is supposed to work. You remove the obstacles. It's a little abstracted. There's different ways to sort of do it. But kind of the thing is that he's very swingy. And it's swingy in a way that's not fun. You look at someone like Maleficent where like you can play a bunch of curses out really quickly, but without the defense, when the heroes come out and take them out, that's on you. Maleficent kind of has that balance of I could play really quickly and have no defense and possibly win, or I could play a little slower, put some defense up, make sure I have the tools to kind of get around if something gets lost, and then set up to win the game. So Maleficent, I think, is actually a really good example of how to build that type of swingy character where it's actually giving you that understanding of what you're supposed to do. Gaston's deck and Fate deck and the way his realm is set up is making it so that swinginess is like way too like up and down. Basically, an example is you go through and play one game of Gaston, you feel like you won, you won, and you actually did really well, but you don't understand completely how you did well. And then when you lose as Gaston, you feel like you did a lot of things right, but then you're like, why did I lose? Because he's incredibly swingy, regardless of what you do. And when you get fated, you just feel like you just get punched in the face. So these changes right here should kind of help make it so Gaston doesn't feel as swingy, and he does have few more decisions that he can make in terms of trying to accomplish his goal. So let's kind of talk about this, and let's get right to it. So Gaston has a realm change. He is the second one that we're listing, maybe not the last one. Belle's House, remove the top Vanquish action, replace it with a move. Gaston has a huge issue when it comes to his allies of where they are positioned. That move action at the top sucks. Or just not being able to do it in general sucks. And he has way too many ways to vanquish in his deck already. Removing that is going to make it so Gaston, can move his allies around and reposition them if he needs to. That location isn't great, but you get the discard, gain money, draw a card. The move action is at the top too. So you still are incentivized to try to vanquish something over there. You can. And technically, Gaston does have his move, time to follow me card. So you can still reposition if you have a weird situation where you definitely need to move. So you're not locked out. So there you go. A simple change. I think that should change a lot of stuff. And with this next change right here, if you're worried about the Vanquish stuff, you're definitely going to want to Vanquish with this particular card. Bella's Mine has some new things to it. You still can perform a Vanquish action, but there is now the addition of when you Vanquish using the card, you can remove an obstacle. The catch, though, is you can still Vanquish, but you cannot remove an obstacle if Belle is the target of the Vanquish itself. So this will make it so vanquishing other characters outside the two that naturally get rid of the stuff is something you're going to want to do. Gaston can kind of get in these weird situations where because he needs money to remove obstacles, he doesn't have any other ways to really do it outside of looking for two particular heroes, and they might not come out. This way, if heroes do come out, you can spend money in power to basically defeat them, as long as you got the allies to do so, and get that benefit. So it's really good. And you still have Hunter's Instinct, which costs 3 and allows you to knock them out without the allies, but you're just not going to gain the obstacle unless it's Maurice. So this will make it, a little bit more of a decision matrix with how you want to use the allies with Gaston and what you're vanquishing. And it's going to make your opponent a little bit more nervous because now you have an additional, and the only additional of what I've added, a way to remove obstacles naturally with Gaston. So this should be a really good change for him. So hopefully this really helps improve the gameplay for Gaston and not make him as swingy on the obstacle side. 5 dozen eggs now cost 2 from 4. I don't want to even speak anymore on this card. This card costs way too much money. I get why it was designed the way it was with the cost, but Gaston already has a huge power problem. So if you need to get the strength to vanquish a particular target, now this is going to ensure that basically whatever you're trying to vanquish based off the ally or whatnot, and you don't have an extra ally there, you can just spend an extra power to slap this onto the ally and just take out the character that you need to. So I actually think it's a good idea to make it 2 and make it that punishable style card. I just think 4 is way too much. You can make fun of it because it's a meme, but memes are not power in this case. We're ignoring the memes. The next one is Beast. Beast now has it so his effect is a May. So all this does is that if you fish him out with, oh god, what's the card? It is whatever the one that's 0 cost. I forget the name at the top of my name, or the name at the top of my head. Words are hard. Been doing this for an hour at this point, recording this video. It makes it so if you fish him out as Gaston, you don't have to move the allies if you have it set up at Beast Castle. So you can kind of sort of fish for it now a little bit and know it's not going to punish you, but it is a May. So if your opponent plays it, you're still going to get screwed. It's still going to suck. It's bad. But you do have an additional move action now that you can use to kind of get over there. So you won't have to worry about this as much, but it's still, still a thing. So there you go. Beast is a little changed. Now, some of these fate changes I'm about to list right here are very minor in the grand scheme of things, but I think it's worth noting kind of why they are done the way they are. Because believe it or not, because Gaston has so many unique fate cards in his deck, there's so many weird freaking situations that he can get in when the opponent fates you, and just cleaning it up a little bit is going to make it so understanding how it works, it's just going to make more sense. So first thing, the Rose. When you play the Rose, it is not discarded after it resolves. So you can't Rose into Rose, all that nonsense, and have all these weird situations occur where it kind of gets shuffled back in. It is played like a traditional effect. You play it, it resolves, you resolve the to completion, and then it gets discarded along with the cards that would normally, be used in the fate action. So that's all it does. It just makes it so there's not any weird circumstances of how this card would end up getting used again. Granted, the fating player has to remove an obstacle for Gaston, but yeah, so that's not going to be as crazy. Magic Mirror is not shuffled back into the Fate deck. Because of how powerful Beast is, and the fact that you could use this in tandem with the Rose, making it so having those situations where that could occur are just gone. So once you play it, you get to replay Beast or move him to the new location, and that's it. You don't get to shuffle that back into the deck, especially because of how powerful Beast is in context of what Gaston's ally pool and how to defeat stuff is. Making it so you can just keep moving Beast around and really screwing up the ally placement is just really rough. So making it so you can't cycle that through is going to just be easier for Gaston to kind of manage that situation. Show me the Beast. this beautiful Gaston card never made any freaking sense. So, it costs 1, and the latter half of the ability of the discard where both Belle and Beast are out is gone. So when you play it now, if Belle and Beast are in play, you just do the Belle effect. If Belle is in play, you just do the Belle effect. If Beast is in play, you do the Beast effect. It costs 1. So the idea is that it's a cheaper version of Temper if Beast is out in play. It gives you some more combo opportunities if you want to like play it right before you vanquish Beast. And if Belle's in play, it's a way for you to essentially like spend 1 to gain 2, so you net yourself 1. So there's actually a little bit of usefulness with the card now. So it's not completely useless. It's still a unique card. You're probably not going to you're still going to probably discard it when you get the chance to, but it's at least an option now. So there you go. Don't worry about that card. It should be playable now at the very least. It is you. This card. So this is a tough call because technically the card could be really good or really bad. So with this change right here, it allows you to replace 3 obstacles. The next slew of changes right here is essentially what's going to happen is that you now have ways to basically counteract the cards that Gaston plays with that remove the obstacles. So when you play Get Out, It Is You now is the counter to that. It Is You can no longer replace 4 obstacles. So there is that nice little switch up right there, but it now can directly counter one of the cards that Gaston can play. On top of that, Massaging My Feet is gone. That card is removed. Saving My Life has 2 copies instead of just 1. So Saving My Life now counters Come Into the Light. Since Come Into the Light is location specific, as well as Saving My Life is location specific, those cards counter. So now things should be a little bit more balanced because now you have so many books, there's only 1 copy of that. So then when you play Temper, there's that counter. This right here should make it so, because of the way that some of these replace obstacle stuff works, they're now counters to what Gaston can do and can't overly do stuff. Because Massaging My Feet can counter both Temper and Come Into the Light and Get Out because of it is not location specific. It Is You can do the same thing because it had all the locations as a target, but it also could be nerfed because if you play it too early, you only get to do it really 1 obstacle per location. So it adds a little bit more decision-making process and a little bit more counterplay to how those cards work. So that's my opinion. It's going to at least make it so Gaston can actually do some stuff with how the obstacle removal works against the Fate deck. So, and technically, it just helps out. It just doesn't make it as brutal. The last change for Gaston is very minor. Maurice is now 3 strength. This in general isn't going to be a huge deal because you could still take him out with Hunter's Instinct, no problem. You're still going to need at least probably 2-3 allies to take him out if he's got the invention at his location, so that's fine. This will make it so Cogsworth is a little bit more playable because now you can play Cogsworth at Maurice's location and it will actually counter Hunter's Instinct. So there's now a little extra bit of that to kind of go around. So that's kind of nice. So he did get a nerf. So you can't just easily take out Maurice anymore in some circumstances. But there you go. That will make it so if you feel like Gaston to get a little bit of a buff, Maurice, which is probably the easier hero to take out that allows you to remove obstacles as Gaston, it's a little bit more difficult, using other tools outside of Hunter's Instinct. And Hunter's Instinct can now actually be countered by this. So there you go. Should help a little bit. So there you go. That's all Gaston. These changes could be completely stupid and you can think I'm an idiot. But this right here, for the most part, I actually forgot a change. Almost forgot it. And this is a pretty big one. Swoon costs 0 instead of 1. And instead of gaining 3, you only gain 2. This will make it so most of the sacrifice cards, like I've talked about before, where you have to sacrifice something, and it should cost 0. So if you're going to put an obstacle back to gain some resources off of it, you're still going to net the same amount of power, but you no longer have to spend a power to actually trigger the ability. And because it doesn't cost power anymore, the drawing cards portion of it actually is a little bit more incentivized. Most of the time when I play with people, seeing someone draw cards using Swoon is never something you've ever seen. So this will make it so you're actually going to want to use it. Giving Gaston 3 power off of this when you don't have to spend any money, probably is a little too strong for how much he can actually gain. So I wouldn't recommend doing that. But you can try it. Let me know. See if you like 3 power instead of 2 with the 0 cost change on this. So there you go. That's it for Gaston, though. I haven't missed anything else, hopefully. But this should make it so his swingy game is a little bit more balanced, kind of a little bit more in line with Maleficent. I would say it's still probably in the more swingy territory, but at least now you have some more interesting and more decisions that you can make with Gaston to get to that end point of trying to get all the obstacles off the board. That hasn't changed at all with Gaston. His objective is still, as soon as you complete it, you're good. So there you go. Gaston, hopefully these changes don't sound stupid. Last but certainly not least is the Horn King. And the Horn King is an interesting little character right here because Gaston, in my opinion, personally, had a lot of weird design decisions that made him not fun to play. Horn King is just bland. He doesn't have a lot of interesting things going on, and he's incredibly slow. So trying to lift his speed up a little bit, make him have some more interesting decisions, should make him a little bit more of an exciting character and help balance him out a little bit with the roster. He plays very much like a Marvel Villainous villain by default. So that's what kind of makes him also a little weird because he needs to have those, he plays in that slower capacity already. So some of these changes allow it so there's a little bit more decision making as well as increase his speed just a smidge. He still needs to be a slower character because he can do really big stuff. So balancing that out was a little tricky, but I feel like these changes right here should be pretty on the nose for what you probably wanted out of Horn King to make him a little easier to play and understandable and just do more cool stuff. Because in general, some of these villains should be able to always do cool things. And I feel like Horn King and Gaston to some extent did not have those options to do really cool stuff. Even if it doesn't allow you to win, you want to do cool things. So Horn Kings can change a little bit. So the first thing that's going to change, the objective is now a start of turn objective. The reason for this is that as we go down with the changes, Horn King's speed has increased quite a bit. Not crazy, but it's enough that you're going to need to make sure that there is that way for Horn King to get smacked down once he hits that last portion. So this also going to be something that if you want to try these changes out and you're like, this is way too fast, you take this back. But as you're going to see, your Horn King's probably going to need this to make sure that he's not going to be instantaneously super crazy fast character. Now, Horn King's got a lot of location changes. 3 of his locations had 2 of the actions switched from the top to the bottom. So I'll go over these very quickly. Fairfoe Kingdom has the Vanquish action switched with the Gain 3. Throne Room has the Move action switched with the Vanquish. And the Dungeons has the Gain 2 switched with the Move. So all in all, what's going on here? The biggest thing is that with the Gain 3 being at the top, there were many situations where because Horn King wasn't gaining enough money, he couldn't really play cards, and his other places where he can gain money didn't have a play of cards. So you would have to, if those things get covered in weird ways, he gets stalled really hard, really fast. He does have really good Vanquish tools, but the place where he wants to go Vanquish and all that stuff isn't super effective towards his game plan. That's not the Gain 3. So switching all this around a little bit is going to make it so he can gain 3 and still play cards and do all that stuff. So that's why all this stuff has changed. So hopefully you agree with me on these changes right here. They're really all to kind of balance out all that stuff. And hopefully it's going to make Horn King not get in these stall situations and increase his speed quite a bit, which explains why the objective is now a start turn. Now, with his little cauldron tile, once you claim it, once you flip it over, it inherently did not have an ability. It basically just kind of specified the way that you played the Cauldron-born. Now, when you get to the power of the Black Cauldron, if you still have an Ancient Soldiers, you can go to that location when you do that, do the activate action, and now when it's on that side, you can use it to grab a Cauldron-born and put it into your hand. Now, here's the thing, though, you have to keep in mind. You still have to sacrifice the Ancient Soldiers to play the Cauldron-born. So there is a little bit of trickiness when you're going about doing this stuff here, where if you got too many Ancient Soldiers out and you probably have to still search for some Cauldron-born and you sacrifice them, you won't be able to search anymore. So another change that we'll get to. This is a good thing, so it allows him to speed up his game plan a little bit, but you are going to sacrifice the ability to search. So you really need to make sure that you kind of get stuff in the correct order still, which he still has ways to kind of get around that. So The Cauldron-born, the way that they are played is different. So rather than it being at the start of your turn, as basically a free action before you move or anything, you spend the power and play them, do all the normal stuff, they are now a card play. So you don't get to play them at the start of your turn for free. You play them as a normal card play. You still have to have the side of the cauldron, power of the cauldron on that tile, on that side, and you still have to sacrifice an ancient soldiers to do so. So that part hasn't changed. This is going to make it so when there were situations where you couldn't really do anything, you now can, because for the most part, Hornet King can still have some play card stuff and do things. But there were times where, especially towards the end, since you were saving the power to play the Cauldron-born, you weren't really doing anything. You were just going to gain the power and then probably ending your turn or discarding stuff and la-di-da. Now, you can even go to Fairfoe Kingdom, play 2 of them. You go to another location, play a Cauldron-born down, all that stuff. This is kind of also weird, too, because technically the Ancient Soldiers still require a card play. But since they already cost a lot and they have to be out and all that stuff, it's going to balance things out a little bit in terms of the speed, but it's still going to allow you as the Horn King to move a little faster when you're kind of like, all right, I've used all my tools to get the Cauldron under my control and get it to the flip side and set my stuff up. I just want to start playing these Cauldron-born that I got in my hand. So this should help kind of speed that process up for you. Only moments away from victory now kind of operates more like a traditional like passive condition where instead of it being when someone plays an item, if someone just has an item in their realm, you can just play this card and grab the item and you're good to go. So no worries about that. No problems. So this condition is still going to be a little rare because, like I said, with the new villain change with the conditions, this is going to make it so you're going to still have to have a villain that's going to make sense with. So like you're not going to be able to play this against Scar. So villains that aren't going to be playing items like this very often, you won't be able to do it. But at the same time, you'll actually be able to want to play this now and have situations where you're going to want to play it. Now, these 2 changes, I'm going to go from, we'll list them out like so. We have made a bargain, now costs 0. So it makes sense to now shuffle your discard pile back into your deck and it costs 0. The ladder effect has changed. The ladder effect just never made any sense because it was like spend a 3 additional power to remove the sword, and the sword had to be in play. Derwin, whatever the heck the sword was called. I've never seen the Black Cauldron, but I know there's a sword. So now what you can do is that as a May ability for this portion, you can find it and play it onto a hero for free. The rest of it, that's it though. The rest of the normal effect is gone. So that's just, still do the shuffle discard pile thing, and then you have this effect. Now, when Derwin is in play, if you defeat the hero who has the sword, you now get to claim the Black Cauldron. This will make it so the other ways to claim the Black Cauldron, this is technically the free way of doing it just to get that item in play. And since you'll have different allies and items that allow you to kind of get rid of it, you're still technically spending a little bit more to do so. But if you already have that stuff in play and there's a hero in the target, you can just kind of swing that all together. This makes a little bit more sense. It's not as restrictive because you can at least get it out, which is nice. So there you go. So that's all the changes with that. It should help give you at least another option to claim the Black Cauldron, but not making it so freaking confusing and stupid. So there's the change. And still has the same idea as well. So there you go. Creeper now has his strength increased from 1 to 2. This will just make it so since he already costs 2 to play with his ability, it kind of makes more sense to play him. My ideology with when it comes to unique cards is that you should always kind of want to play them because if they're unique, they should be pretty powerful in the deck because there's not multiple copies of it. Because of the way that a lot of the heroes are in his pool, a lot of them are 1, but some of them are also 2. So making it so Creeper is basically forced to move to your location after you take someone out makes sense. And you can sort of use it to combo depending on how hero placement is in the area as well. The only way he won't be able to take someone out now is if they got the sword, if they got the strength bonus from the princess, or if it's the witches. So he still has that big restriction when it comes to that stuff, but he'll be able to take out more things and justify him being 2 for the cost. So there you go. The last change is is basically a nerf to the Horn King. It's also probably way wordier than I need it to be, but it's going to be a little fun flavor, even though I've not seen the movie. So Gurgi's Sacrifice does the normal text that it always does. You get to flip the Black Cauldron. However, if Gurgi's in play As a secondary effect to this, you can defeat Gurgi as the fading player and make it so you trigger the Cauldron's ability where you have to discard a Cauldron-born at the start of the turn. So you can just remove that, an extra Cauldron-born in the process if you kill Gurgi. On top of this, what this does is that since Gurgi always gets shuffled back into the discard pile, when you, as the fading player, see Gurgi out and you know that Gurgi's sacrifice hasn't been pulled yet, you can put Gurgi out and then try to fade the next turn, forcing the Horn King player to be like, I got two Cauldron-born out and I really don't want to deal with this nonsense, so you can take it out. You take out Gurgi, and there's now an incentive to try to put Gurgi back into the deck. So some cool little things with that, and it gives the opponent an extra way to punch the Horn King a little harder since he is moving a little faster. So there you go. That should help kind of add an extra flavor, and also who doesn't like killing Gurgi? So there you go. That's all the Horn King stuff. Overall, this is going to make him a whole lot faster, but it's going to make him a little smoother to play. Have a few more decisions that he can do. He should be a lot better of a character. And that, my friends, is my pitch for Disney Villainous 2.0, the patch notes right here. So let me know what you think. Comment below. Let me know how stupid you really think I am. I will say that I don't think all of this is probably like the best way to approach this. But some things you need to keep in mind. I am not a Disney fan. A lot of these changes aren't made for thematics. They are made for gameplay purposes to kind of help do things better. So when it comes to those decisions, that's where I'm coming from. I'm trying to make sure that the two-player experience is the best damn experience it could possibly be based off what we got. And you got to keep in mind, normally games like this are not going to be errated like TCGs where there's like a card that's busted and you might ban the card and all that stuff. This game is very unique because it's a character asymmetric deck game where everyone has a different win condition. So balancing that is really a game of speed. So all the changes are around of balancing how fast someone can move, how consistent that speed can be. And that's really hard to do when you have right now a roster of 18 villains. And we're about to get 3 more in the coming months. So let me know what you think. I'm going to actually paste the document to this below in the video description right here. So if you do want to see it all, you can view it right there. And hopefully you enjoy it, and I hope the justifications that I have make sense to you. And try them out. Let me know if you actually enjoy playing with these changes, or if one of my changes is really bad for balance, let me know. I would love to actually try to implement this, so that way, going forward, if you want to play competitive, if you want to play casually with your friends, you just want to have a new experience after playing Disney Villainous for almost 4 years, it's like a fresh start. And that's really the goal with this patch right here, is to make it so it's more to refresh the game for you, rather than say the designers suck and all that stuff. No, the designers are great. These are all incredibly well-designed characters. Some of them just need a little bit of tweaking to help in these very competitive mindset or very like rules lawyery situations and stuff. I just want all these characters to be fun to play, and I want to keep the spirit of how they were designed. So that's why I really don't want to change too much about goals and stuff like that. Horn King was really the only exception, but that was because of his speed increase. So hopefully you enjoyed this, and I hope you folks enjoyed seeing my beautiful face again. My name is Luke Jones, and I'll see you folks on the next video.